The NFL draft is officially in the books, and while most people are looking at the rookies, I'm looking at the NFL veterans whose fantasy football value just shot through the roof post-draft. Some of these players hit the jackpot without even leaving their couch, and a couple of these teams basically walked into 2025 saying, yeah, this is fine. Let's get into the players whose fantasy stock is flying up after the draft. Baker Mayfield is officially living the good life right now. He was already surrounded by Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Jalen McMillan, but the Bucs looked at the offense and said, you know what this needs? More wide receivers. So what do? They go out and they draft Emeka Egbuka, the number 2 consensus wide receiver on the board in the first round. Plus, the biggest need Tampa had, defense, they didn't really address it all that much, which means we're looking at another year of more shootouts, more passing volume, and more fantasy points. Baker finished as a low-end QB1 in 2024, and with all this firepower, he's got a chance to be even better in 2025. All right, let's talk Caleb Williams. You'd think having DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Cole Kmet would be enough to support a quarterback, but the Bears said, nah, let's go full Madden franchise mode here. They used the number 10 pick on tight end Colston Loveland, a super athletic mismatch nightmare, and then they grabbed wide receiver Luther Burden, a slot wizard who's got major yard after catch juice. And of course, this all goes with the fact that new head coach Ben Johnson, the man who made Detroit's offense one of the best, is now the play caller for the Bears. With a revamped offensive line and weapons all over the field, Caleb Williams has literally no excuse this season. If he isn't a fantasy QB1 this year, then maybe we just have to accept the fact that Caleb Williams is a bust. Now, Drake May didn't come into the draft with the same level of hype as Caleb Williams, but he was very solid last year as a rookie. And then what did the Patriots do this year? On days 1 and 2, they went full protect the quarterback mode. They gave him 2 offensive linemen, including the best offensive lineman in this class. They also drafted the most explosive running back in the class, a guy who can block and catch passes. Not to mention they added one of the best ex-wide receivers in this class in Kyle Williams, giving May a true outside threat. This is not going to be the same Patriots offense we saw last year. It might not be elite just yet, but it's definitely at least good enough, and that alone is a massive win for Drake May. May was one of those quarterbacks you could pick up and stream from time to time last year. This year, he might be more than that. All right, time to give it up for the running backs and Chase Brown, one of the biggest post-draft winners. I'll admit it, I was pretty convinced the Bengals were going to bring in some competition for him at running back, but they waited until round 6 to draft Taj Brooks, and let's be honest, he's more of a rotational guy than a threat. Meanwhile, Brown was great last year. We know he's explosive, he's shifty, and he fits this offense well. So once again, going into 2025, Chase Brown has a real shot to be a 3-down back or at least dominate most of the touches in this offense. Currently being drafted as an RB12 in fantasy, and honestly, that feels like it might be a little low after the NFL draft. Let's talk about one of the most slept-on values in fantasy right now, and that is James Cook. There was a lot of noise about the Bills drafting another running back. Some people definitely had the Bills taking a running back and James Cook getting replaced, but you know what they did? Nothing. Well, almost nothing. They did draft a tight end in round 6, but that's it. Every other pick was a defensive pick here, which means James Cook is still the man in the backfield. And he was great last year. He's dynamic in space. He's solid between the tackles. He's productive in both the run and the passing game. And he still has minimal competition behind him. It's going to be just him and Ray Davis, basically. So once again, as he was in 2024, James Cook is going to be a major value in 2025 fantasy drafts. Another running back many people thought was going to get, maybe not replaced, but a reduced role was Devon Achane of the Dolphins. Sure, the Dolphins did draft Ollie Gordon, but it was in the 6th round, and this isn't exactly a guy who makes me scared for Devon Achane. He only ran a 4.6 140, and he had a rough finish last year in his final college season. His production dropped off a cliff. Achane is still easily the most explosive player in that backfield, and we saw last season how he can turn, 8 touches into 100 yards, catch a bunch of passes. Yeah, the Dolphins backfield is somewhat crowded, but it's crowded by a bunch of guys who are just guys, not anybody that makes me scared for Devon Achane. As long as he's healthy, Devon Achane is a weekly RB1 and needs to be drafted that way in fantasy. And then I got to ask, what just happened in Chicago? Everyone, and I mean almost everyone, thought for sure the Bears were going to draft a running back this year. DeAndre Swift is an injury-prone running back, and he wasn't even good last year. So what do the Bears go out and do? Nope, they just get more weapons for the passing game. Plus, they also upgraded that offensive line, which I guess means Swift is locked in as the RB1 for an offense run by Ben Johnson, behind a much improved offensive line, surrounded by legit weapons. I don't even know what to make of DeAndre Swift at this point of his career. Is he good? Is he not good? Can he stay healthy? I don't know, but he's in arguably the best situation he's ever been in, and apparently the Bears believe in him. Then there's Brian Robinson Jr. This guy's pretty much the definition of a lunch pail running back who just keeps grinding. A lot of people thought he'd be replaced this offseason. I wasn't one of them, but I thought it was a possibility. Yet the Commanders definitely backed me up. They had bigger needs, and they went out and fielded them. With Austin Ekeler as the pass-catching back and Brian Robinson being fine by NFL standards, not to mention their QB being arguably the best running back on the entire team, it never really made sense that the Commanders were going to use high-end draft capital on a running back. Look, Brian Robinson is never going to be a flashy RB1 for fantasy, but once again, for the third straight year, he's probably going to be a great value in your fantasy drafts and a dependable RB2. Okay, I can't believe I'm saying this, but we might need to talk about the Raiders offense. First, they brought in Pete Carroll. That was already a nice upgrade. Then they signed Geno Smith to stabilize the QB spot. That was great. But they weren't done. They went out and drafted Ashton Jeanty, one of the most dynamic running backs in this class and really one of the most dynamic running backs we've seen in a long time. And they drafted one of my favorite sneaky wide receivers, Jack Bech, a great wide receiver with serious yards after catch potential. Add that to the already existing Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers, and you've got something cooking in Vegas. This team went from fantasy dumpster fire to serious sleeper potential to be one of the best offenses in 2025. Don't sleep on Vegas. This offense could sneak into the top 10 as far as scoring offenses go in 2025, and a lot of their skill players are absolute steals. Last one, let's go back to Buffalo, because while a lot of people expected them to draft a running back, most people expected them to draft a wide receiver, but they didn't at all. Again, their only offensive player was a tight end in the 6th round. That means it's full steam ahead for Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, and Josh Palmer. Now, of course, none of these guys are going to be fantasy studs, wide receiver 1 types. Josh Allen will spread the ball out, and you know he's going to vulture a lot of touchdowns with his legs, but someone's got to catch these passes. We've already seen what Shakir can be. Coleman could get better in year 2, and Palmer has been solid when called upon with the time with the Chargers. So in best ball leagues, these guys are gold. In redraft, yeah, you take a flyer on them and you see who pops. But either way, the Bills wide receiver depth chart just cleared up after the draft, and all 3 of these guys should have value. And that's a wrap on the biggest winners after the NFL draft. But if you want to see everything else I got covering the NFL draft that you need for 2025, you can find it in this playlist right here.